Welcome to Her Incredible Mind, where we are highlighting some of the most successful women in science, technology, engineering, and math. These women are inspirational leaders, showing resilience in the face of adversity. By sharing these success stories, we hope to gain insight, inspire, and help guide those who are struggling on their journey within this industry. Hopefully, their stories will inspire you or someone you know to pursue a career in STEAM.
All right, so today we're welcoming Tina Sheridan. And Tina, can we talk about your role today? Can you describe your role today? What you do, what company are you working with, and what industry are you in?
Sure. I am a corporate attorney reviewing commercial contracts for Cognizant, which is a global IT services provider. So,
That's great. That's great. I've actually worked with Cognizant in the past, so that's great to hear. And I know that as a service provider, the contract amount must be pretty large, given the amount of contracts and business that Cognizant does. So I'm sure you're very busy.
I am. I'm lucky though that I'm devoted just to the Microsoft technology.
Oh,
So
okay.
it narrows my scope a little bit, but there is still a lot of business we're trying to do.
Sure, sure. So how did you decide on this role?
So it's a rather interesting path that got me here. I was in college from 95 to 99 and then law school through 2002. And at that time, technology was evolving at a breakneck pace. And at the same time, the law was struggling to keep up with what was going on. And I'd known long before I went to college I wanted to be an attorney. But when I saw what was going on in the tech industry, I knew I wanted to be part of that changing industry.
Sure.
And so I focused on technology and law in law school. And unfortunately, timed my graduation with a little downturn in the tech industry in 0203. And so I did a lot of other legal work in the intervening years. And finally, in 2015, a small 70-person company in Washington, D.C. was looking for their first attorney to be in-house. And so I got a job with this small company, knowing that they were planning to expand. And over the past 6 years, we went from 70 employees to 500 employees globally. And then we were purchased by Cognizant a year ago. And so it's just been a crazy, fun expansion journey with this company.
That's great. It's interesting lately, especially how law and technology are intersecting. It's very interesting. I'm seeing a lot of CIOs or VPs of IT or even directors of IT are now reporting to chief legal officers at companies, because really what they're spearheading and what they're in charge of is the data integrity, intellectual property, all the stuff that traditionally would lie in that area that legal is responsible for, and IT's kind of the keeper, if you will, the gatekeeper of that data. So it's interesting to see that. Do you see a lot more of that now that or is it the same as when you got in, we just came around to it from a different vertical?
No, I think it has definitely evolved. Part of it might be that my company has evolved over time, but there's definitely a great deal more involvement throughout the company in what would have been predominantly legal issues in the past and sat in their own silo. So today, before we agree to, say, a cap on our liability for a data breach, we have a number of different departments that are weighing in on the risk and how we're mitigating those risks and what kind of controls we can put in it as a company for our customers' benefit and safekeeping their data, and for our own benefit to protect us as a safekeeper of their data.
Right. That is the thing everybody's talking about right now, right? Is how safe is your data? We hear it every day in the news, and it's definitely something that we all should be thinking about. It's a different time in technology with that.
It is. And the law is so different country to country as well.
That's a very good segue. When you think about the fact that how much from an international law now you need to use and think about when you're approving contracts, you're also working with attorneys internationally, I would assume, correct?
We are. A lot of our companies are global. And so when we're dealing with the European clients, we have to take into consideration GDPR and ensure that we're meeting those standards. Some of our countries are qualified to work under GDPR, some countries aren't. And so you have to think not only about the contract, but can you deliver under that contract based on the countries you're staffing from?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you for that. That is definitely good information about GDPR and kind of how it has changed, especially working in organizations with labor laws. Because when you think about, I did some work in Denmark, and they have some of the strictest labor laws that are there. And it's interesting to try to staff that particular, project or program. It's not for a lack of wanting to work or wanting to be involved in the project, but really, they are very strict about enforcing the labor laws in those countries.
Yes, yeah. And we have to consider that when we're hiring, our independent contractors and our vendors, to make sure that even if they're located in other countries, that they are contracted in a way that allows us to use them in places like Denmark or other countries with strict labor laws.
Right. So what matters to you most when you're thinking about the role that you would like or the role that you have right
I like challenge. That really is what brought me to the company that I started with. And it's what keeps me going now in the middle of we're integrating into Cognizant at this time. I like the excitement, the challenge, the fact that it's constantly changing. With the original company I was with, I was the only attorney, so I was the general counsel there, and I had to know our insurance policies. I had to know our vendor contracts. I had to know our client contracts. So there's just a lot of diving into different areas within the corporate legal system. And as we expanded and acquired other companies, learning how to integrate them into our corporate way of doing things. And now I'm on the other side of the table, and I'm being incorporated into a bigger organization. And there's just a lot of interesting problems that come up as you're going through it, learning that there are different ways of doing things and solving for that and finding which way is the best path forward.
It's kind of the world now, right? With mergers and acquisitions, you see so many of these companies coming together, and you're really merging together not only the company or the product, but you're also merging together the culture. And that sometimes is the biggest part that we're all trying to, make work, right? And make everyone feel as if they're all one culture now, when it was really two separate, completely different, organizations, or similar, but still had differences as you go along. I've done it many times. It's definitely one of the most challenging aspects of any career or professional opportunity that you get. So it's definitely up there as far as challenging.
Yes, yeah. But ultimately, it's also a great time to reevaluate what you're doing as a company and get rid of what's not working. So if you can stomach the not knowing for a little while, ultimately you can end up in a much better place.
Right. And I think too, there's a freshness to it. There's something that says, maybe this will breathe some fresh air into what we're doing on both sides, because now it's a different, way of, even, when you're a smaller company and you're bought by a huge fish, that can be really hard to take. But when you start to think about it, some of it can be that you're doing the same thing, but just at a different scale than you would as a,
as a larger company. So it's interesting. And I think that it takes a lot of patience and a lot of wanting to be part of the change. It's definitely, a consuming, career event.
It definitely is.
So many of us have changed our path, or we've tried to do something different, and we haven't really wanted, to continue on in a role at some point. Do you feel that your career path has been always what you wanted to do, or have there been other things that you looked at?
No. So where I am right now is where I did want to be when I was in law school, but because of the economy when I graduated, I've raised two sons. They're in high school and college now. My career path has zigged and zagged all over the place before finally getting in-house at a tech company, which was my dream job. I worked in real estate for a period of time before the housing market collapsed. And then I did a lot of consulting work. I went back into real estate for a few years, working for a construction company and a landlord, doing everything from contracting to evictions, before the position opened up with the consulting company in DC. So it was not a straight path. I'm glad I took a lot of those jobs. I learned a lot of things about things that were tangent to where I am today. Working for a construction company, I had to learn about professional insurance. I needed to understand how that worked, which was great when I was managing insurance policies for a tech company as well.
I find that most women respond to that question a lot like yourself, where, I did this and then I did that. And, I learned a lot from this role and I brought that forward into another role. And it's definitely something that we see within, the women that we've been interviewing. But what I feel is hard sometimes for women is thinking that they needed to stay in that track, that they should stay where they were. Like, when you mentioned the two, kind of financial crises that you actually navigated through, one, getting out of school, and then the second one, in your real estate career, it's, the resilience that you need, and kind of the confidence in yourself to stay, in the zone. That's very, very admirable. Good for you for really, kind of moving when you needed to move, and staying, where you needed to be, because you knew that you could use it somewhere else later.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So when you think about obstacles in your career, obviously you've had two major ones, right? With two major recessions, that's not easy. But what else would you think was an obstacle in your career?
I would say especially, well, my oldest is 20 years old now, but 20 years ago, navigating the corporate workforce as a new mother was extremely challenging. Maternity leave was really frowned upon. The idea of any type of work home balance was pretty novel. The expectation was for men to work, women to stay home. Having your spouse take time off to help with any sort of sick days with the children or doctor's appointments or any of that was unheard of back then. And so trying to navigate a professional life and maintain that professional life while still having a family and caring for them was very difficult. It's very encouraging to see now how corporations are treating child rearing amongst their employees, and the number of companies I see now that offer generous paternity leave packages so that dad can stay home for a while and you can balance out your time off around birth of baby, or the fact that it's far more accepted for men in the workplace to take time off to care for their children when they're sick or to work from home. One of the best parts of this pandemic has been being on conference calls with my male colleagues and seeing their children wandering through the call. It's refreshing to see that men are stepping up with the childcare and that it's being accepted in the workplace.
I couldn't agree more. That's a great, kind of feedback on women and how their role has changed and the acceptance of the mother, image, like you're saying, the role of the mom in the workforce. It's interesting. I had my daughter 17 years ago, and I worked from home. I remember it was like 8 to 10 weeks of maternity leave, and that was it. And now I kind of think, well, most of us have been on a 14-month maternity leave now with COVID,
Right.
and nothing, and companies are chugging along and things are getting done. And I think that that we've come to a spot where we understand that, working from home can happen, and it can happen successfully, so, it is great to see. And I couldn't agree with you more.
No, I agree.
The other question we ask is, when we think about, our journey, and you've obviously had a very, very dynamic and in a very, honestly impressive journey, with your career and the ability for you, like I said, to change lanes, as you went along. But what would you tell your younger self?
I think I would have told her to relax a little bit more, that it would work out. You now 20 years in the future, those economic downturns were hard, but they were recoverable, that there were opportunities to be gained from the detours that I took. I think right out of school, the tendency is to just really, you want to push into your career. You really want to get established. Sometimes it doesn't happen right away, and it still works out. So not to be as hard on myself.
That is great advice. That really is great advice, especially to young girls today. So speaking of young girls today, I think that, what we think about is, what you had said about relaxing and kind of, it is a journey. It's not a race. What would be the biggest advice you would have to young girls?
I would say to know what their ultimate end goal is and to keep that in their mind, but to not allow that to dominate their decisions. Make decisions that fit where you are at that point in your life, knowing that that ultimate end goal is still there.
That's great. That really is great. And it ties right into what you would tell your own younger self. So that's great. You're taking your own advice, which is great. So what, if you had to boil your LinkedIn profile down to 3 words, what would you say?
Technology corporate counsel.
I like it. I like it. Well, thank you, Tina, for being with us today. We do appreciate it. And, we'll post this video, and some young lady that's out there will see this and be able to, find out whether they want to be a technology corporate counsel.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to speak with you.